Hey there, friends. Welcome to our webinar today. Good to have everyone back in the room. If you've seen one of these before, if you're here for the first time, happy to have you. Some changes have taken place since last we met, Ken. I know that when we previously did one of these webinars, we were coming up on what we thought was going to be the deadline for compliance for these new DOJ ADA accessibility rules. The federal government came in and they pushed the deadlines back a couple of really a year, which I think is probably a little bit of a relief to everybody in the room. We're going to talk a little bit about what that shift means for school districts in Colorado. We're going to talk a little bit about the opportunity that it presents, and we're going to talk about what sort of stayed the same. Again, as the deadline has shifted, really can the requirements have stayed the same? Before we get started, again, if you don't know, we're doing this with the Colorado BOCES Association. I've got Ken Haptonstall with me on the phone. Ken, if you want to say hello.
Yeah, hello everybody. Ken Haptonstall, the co-executive director of the Colorado BOCES Association. Yeah, glad to have everybody here today.
Really happy to have all the folks in the room. Rocket PD, we love doing these things, kind of giving an opportunity for folks to listen and learn about new opportunities that we discover in our community. If you haven't been on one of these before, ArtScan and AOD together have developed a solution or offering a solution that really helps districts remediate more effectively their documents for ADA compliance. We're going to talk about how to do that. I know that for a lot of folks, it is a tedious process. It's one that we've always had the ability to do through manual remediation. But as the requirements for remediation increase, that manual remediation is time consuming, expensive, and not always viable at scale. So we're going to talk a little bit about the deadline shift and then again about the solution that ArtScan and AOD are presenting and providing through the Colorado BOCES Association. Okay, so let's talk first about the big news, right? Which is that timeline shift. It's going to give us more control, which is great. We've got some time now to work within the system. The deadline that I mentioned, that is for the WCAG compliance that we talked about earlier. That deadline has shifted exactly 1 year. It's 1 year less 1 month as of today, so it gives us a little bit of time. The requirements really remain unchanged. Districts are going to have their websites, their PDFs, their applications, all compliant. We really are today, just for clarification, going to show a solution that focuses on those PDFs, those documents that hang off your website that folks are always uploading. Sometimes you don't even know that they've been uploaded. I think some folks will be surprised when they go and look at this, just how many PDF documents they have hanging off of their websites or that they don't know that they have. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that stuff. We'll talk about the fact that this is also a great opportunity, not just to make sure all those documents are compliant, but maybe to do a little gardening and take some of those documents down, Ken, if you don't need all of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think every year as we kind of clean up for fall or spring cleaning in a house, it's kind of similar to that. Like this is a really good time because they did push this back a year, and it's not going away. But I think it does give the opportunity, one, for districts to budget for this work, and two, to really kind of take stock on what they want out there on the open domain. Really, so good opportunity, I think, and this should be a good chance for folks to kind of see what ArchScan can provide. So.
Cool. So I mentioned that timing. Just to reiterate it again, if you want to take a screen grab or a camera shot of this slot here, we'll also send the recording afterwards. But again, it's about 1 year out for those districts that are serving 50,000 or more. If you're serving less than 50,000, right, it is actually 2028. Now, 50,000 is an interesting number because we're not necessarily, again, just talking about students, right? We're talking about communities of 50,000. And you say, well, how is that determined? Well, that could be determined in different ways depending on who you're talking to. So we like to just tell everybody it should comprise the population of your area, whether that's students, parents, stakeholders, staff. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about the size of your population. Okay, so I just thought a little bit of rehash here, like what the rule requires. Again, those websites, those PDFs, and those mobile apps. It's the WCAG 2.1 Level 2A standard. I know that's technical. You can go and search for this on Google or ChatGPT or wherever you do your internet searching to get the specifics on it. But that is just a level standard of compliance that the DOJ rule is looking for. And you're going to see within our system, one of the things that we'll show you is that when we do document remediation, we not only give you the documents back, and this was a big thing for RocketPD because we asked, well, it's great that you can remediate documents, but can you tell me that they have been remediated to a certain standard and a level as required by the rule? And the answer is yes. We're going to show you exactly what that looks like. Again, this applies to all sorts of stuff, right? Those board materials, Ken, those board minutes, all those policy documents, those front-facing policy documents, your SPED documentation for your students, and all that public communication. We've been hearing a lot from school communications folks who have kind of been feeling the pain of this for a while, not just since this rule was announced, but I think in most districts' cases, accessibility and accessibility of documentation is and has been a priority. Certainly, this rule has brought attention to it, but I think that everybody on this call probably would agree that accessible documentation is a priority and is important for a whole host of reasons, probably the least of which is compliance. What would you say to that, Ken?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think two things come to mind. One, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when this came to light in Colorado, I think people really thought this was only a Colorado-based issue, and it's not. This is nationwide. This is across the entire country. So it's not just Colorado that the focus is on this work. It really is widespread. And I think the other thing too is, as you were talking about, it really is about supporting the students and the families in our systems. So, to get this work done is going to help, I think, a tremendous amount for our families to be able to get in and access information. But again, I'm going to go back to the weed in the garden bit because we have so many documents out there, and depending on the level of capacity of your system, because I see some of the superintendents on here are from very small districts, so they need to think about how are they going to do this, and we'll get to really what it takes to do this. But I think getting started now and getting ahead of this whole curve is going to be really advantageous to being not only compliant but really helpful to our community. So
Yeah, at the bottom there, I put accessibility is ongoing, not a one-time project. Ken, I think you just very eloquently stated that the deadline shift that we've had here, it's a good thing in a lot of ways, right? Because it's going to allow you to really plan for this in a way that makes sense for their districts. I think when we were talking to people at the outset and that deadline was originally fast coming, folks kind of were throwing their hands up in the air a little bit and said, well, we don't have the budget for it. We didn't even really know much about this, and now it's staring us in the face. Let's just see what happens. And I think now we have an opportunity to be a little bit more strategic in our planning, and it should be a sigh of relief to everyone that there is more runway, but it also should, I think, point to an opportunity for us to start now. You don't need to necessarily rush, as I put on here, but you do need a plan. And we're going to talk a little bit with Ken about, what that plan might look like for districts in Colorado. Again, like those backlogs are growing, day by day. I mentioned like you don't even know all the time when PDFs are being uploaded to your website, and you might not need to remediate all those PDFs, which is a key point. We're going to be able to use this as an opportunity to determine, to Ken's point about gardening, what we can take down versus what we really do have to get done. And that mix of things, what we take down versus what we need to get, is what's going to get us on the road to compliance and to that responsible use of these tools. The problem hasn't paused or gone away, and I wouldn't even call it a problem. I would just say the requirement hasn't paused or gone away. It is simply the timeline has extended, and of course, accessible access to documentation is our goal anyway. I always tell the story, Ken, about how I'm someone, I've told this, and some of you might have heard it. I'm someone with cerebral palsy. When I was in school, I had a lot of folks who were really looking out after me to make sure that I had access to the things that I need. They weren't documents in a different way necessarily, but they would pull me out of class to help me learn how to carry my books differently, or go up and down stairs differently, or open doors differently. So I needed different things. And because I had access to those things, I was very successful, so much so that I didn't even really think about my disability while I was in school. And I think access to these types of documents, if you have a different type of disability, right, could be very useful to you in that way, because the more that your school is able to provide for you, the less you have to think about the difference between yourself and other students, and you can really focus on what you need in order to be successful. So that's coming from my own personal story, and that's one of the reasons that Rocket PD has been so supportive of this effort. So let's talk about that reality, Ken, again, for most districts, right? Thousands of legacy PDFs created by many, many people over years. Like I said, that'll keep you up at night. So don't worry too much about all of the documents. We're going to show you in a second how you can think about this so that it is manageable. Um, Limited staff time and limited accessibility expertise. Ken, I know this is a big reason that the BOCES got involved in this. Training is an issue and a challenge for a lot of folks. Document remediation is a tedious thing, and not everyone really knows how to do it or how to do it effectively. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, a couple things. One, it is tedious and cumbersome, and I think we can front load some of the work in that we are developing a relationship with CASB to help remediate policies ahead of time. So when you get policies in the future, those will already be compliant. So I think that's one of the things we're doing. And some folks on the call might be thinking, like, what is CBA? What's a BOCES? Why are you part of this? Well, when we started talking to ArchScan and Rocket PD, we hope to be the organization that can really support districts and BOCES around the state in getting good work done at a really cost effective way. So as you're thinking about doing all this work, we did work with ArchScan to get a price reduction to be able to do this work, to be able to support all of you. What we want you to know is that you have a team in your corner, and that's why CBA is here. It's why I'm here, is to really help support districts do this. So you're not trying to do this on your own, or paying a human being actually to do these manually, which you will go broke, honestly, if you
Yeah.
try to do this. So yeah, this is good stuff.
We'll talk a little bit about the pricing differences in a second, just on average, but that manual remediation, as we know, is slow and tedious, and quite frankly, to Ken's point, really expensive. Again, at Rocket PD, if you've seen us at CASB or any of the events around Colorado, our goal really is to listen to community members, because we do offer a lot of professional learning. And when we hear that there are challenges that they are facing, to help them source resources that can assist in those challenges. And that's the reason that we were excited about this tool. I have a background as a ed tech reporter. I started as a journalist writing about educational technology, and I've seen a lot of different solutions out there, and I have been so fascinated by the evolution of AI and what it's allowed to do. I've seen some things that, quite frankly, aren't that good, right? That have done well. And then I've seen some things like this that are starting to get traction, that are really quite amazing in what they're able to do. So excited to show this to you. Again, at the end of the day, friends, it's about access, not compliance. I know that you'll hear me use the word compliance a little bit on this webinar, and that might be the thing that's pushed us, towards some of these conversations. But the reality is, inaccessible documents block families and people who need them. I saw there was an OCR complaint recently. I think the judgment was for like $250,000, and I forget the exact state now. I'm blanking on it, but the issue was not a student that did not have access to documents, but it was a parent and a guardian who did not have access to those documents, and that person struggled to be able to assist their child with their homework, right? And so it came down to that issue. So you've got people in your, you're in your schools, the students, you've got teachers and staff, and then of course the parents and the stakeholders as well, all of whom who need access to those documents. And accessibility builds trust, Ken. Let's face it, right? When you can get access to things quickly, it avoids some kind of tough conversations, right? Because if you can't get access, then you have to go someone. You've got to figure out why you can't get that access. Then you have to potentially lodge a complaint or an OCR complaint, right? Then you have to wait that time to figure out how that's going to be adjudicated. And it's just a painful process. And once that starts to interrupt the conversation, we get focused on the wrong things. But when we can meet the needs of students quickly and of community members quickly, we avoid a lot of that dissonance so that we can have really meaningful conversations about learning. It is a legal requirement and it is a community expectation as well. I wanted to put this slide in here. I just did one of these. I was talking to Ken about this a little bit earlier. I just did a presentation in Massachusetts, and we were talking about AI. You heard me mention it just a little bit there a second ago, but a lot of districts are moving toward a lot of artificial intelligence applications within their back office. When you do that, you have this context problem, right? Which says if an AI is reading documentation, it needs access to documents. In order to be contextually accurate, it needs to have good access to those documents, right? And so if your documents are not compliant and the AI is reading those documents, there could be some challenges with the AI and its output relative to what it is telling you. And the funny thing about AI, and if you've ever used ChatGPT, you've seen this, it won't always tell you when it doesn't have access to something. You might upload a document and you might assume that it has read that document, and then you're reading over the output and you say, wait a minute, I know I uploaded this. Like, why isn't it in this output? And you'll ask it, hey, were you able to read this document? And it might say, oh, no, I wasn't, so I just skipped it. But it won't tell you that if you don't prompt it. So having access to those documents, if you're using AI in your back office, is going to be really, really important. Ken, I don't know if you have any thoughts on just that aspect of it, which I know we haven't touched on before.
Right. No, I would agree with that. I mean, as systems start to use AI more to create reporting processes, to get information out to their communities, you want to make sure the data you're putting into that, and we all know this through history, is what goes in. If it's junk, that's what's going to come out. So having really clean data, really clean information is important. And this process actually helps with that because you don't want to put something out that's not accurate or you don't have time to read it because it's 40 pages long. You want to make sure the data going in is really clean. So it's a good point.
Okay, so the risk here, like I know, like we have a tendency in education in particular, because there's 100 fires every day. We say, oh, we got a little bit more time on this thing, let's push it back. But the reality is, like that deadline's going to come up on us fast again. Ken and I were just talking about how quickly time goes by before you all got on the phone. Summer isn't even here, and it already feels like it's almost over. Kind of same thing when you kind of sit on this stuff, right? Those backlogs, like we said, are growing. I wanted to say something about lawsuits and OCR complaints because I mentioned on a previous webinar that, and the stats, I think I might actually still have them on my desk here. Yeah, so they tripled OCR complaints in schools, tripled since 2024. 40% of those OCR complaints have been ADA related. Now, that's pretty interesting on its face. And then you start to think about what's happening here, which is we've pushed the deadlines out for compliance for DOJ. But what does that really do? Right? Because in the absence of a standard, now we're open to interpretation. So just because the deadline has been pushed doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see less OCR complaints about documentation. You may see less, you may see more. But the reality is, when those come up for judgment or adjudication, it's up to the interpretation at that point of the judge or the body who's looking at that to determine. And so, the risk is still there. I guess I just wanted to point that out. I read an interesting article about that, and I thought, oh, that is curious. So, take that for what you will. Again, this isn't necessarily ambulance chasing here, but I was fascinated by that document. PDFs are often underaddressed, right? Like we just reflexively can we think about our websites? Like our mind goes there, like, well, my hosting company or whoever, my tech department, they've got my website on track. We should be good. We think about other stuff. We think about our applications, our software applications. Oh no, we're paying somebody a monthly fee. They've got that figured out. But we don't always think about those PDF documents, which are included and we need a solution for. And just a note that, like, obviously the cleanup's going to become more expensive over time, right? The more stuff you add without a plan in place, the more difficult it becomes to go back through and find it and organize it. It's like, when you, I was joking with my wife because my daughter leaves her room a mess, right? And I said, if she leaves her room a mess every week without cleaning it up, it's going to become impossible to clean this room up. And I think the same way about this, right? Your pile's getting bigger and bigger, and you're going to need more time eventually to fix it. So getting started now is a great idea.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in a couple things there, Corey. So two things in Colorado. One, many of the superintendents on this call will know and understand that we do have a couple lawyers in the state of Colorado who take pride in the fact that they kind of have frivolous lawsuits whenever they can, and this is another opening for them to do that work. So I just a heads up on that one. And then the second thing, Colorado legislature just passed some legislation here a couple weeks ago that essentially mirrors all the OCR work that's normally done at the federal level to the state level. So the complaint around ADA compliance is actually going to go to the state as well as the feds. So what the creators of the legislation are actually hopeful for is that there are more actual complaints that protect children and the right reason for the complaint.
Mm.
However, what that's going to do is increase this type of a of an issue potentially down the road if we're not paying attention to it. So just so folks are aware, Colorado has a couple big whammies that kind of set in the background, making sure we're going to get this work done sooner than later, so people are protected. So
I think it was in Colorado where I started hearing some about. And I hope I don't I know the number right, but people were mentioning like $2,500 letters or something that people were receiving from lawyers, and that was something that folks were talking about back in December when I was there. So I imagine that that's still going on. Speaking of those lawyers that you mentioned.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages of what we're talking about today, which really is something that we like to call um, automation first remediation. And why that's so important is because, again, we've had the ability to remediate documents. If you work in a school district, if you've done this work, you understand that that is something that we can do, but that it takes a lot of time to do well. And with the amount of documents we're talking about, it's almost, you know, uh, insurmountable. So we need to look at automation first. Why? Because automation first will allow us to take all the things that we can do through automation, get those done quickly and efficiently so that we can focus our time, right, and our training on those things that we may need to go a little bit deeper on. When we were looking at this, previously, a document might cost you somewhere between and I should say a page. A page should cost you somewhere between $5 and $25. If you have a large document, think about that for 1 second, and you start to see the cost of these things balloon pretty quickly. Again, the volume of those types of documents is always underestimated in schools. We've been sitting on a lot of calls where they'll go and do these cursory scans of websites, and these cursory scans can only see what's front facing, at a surface level, and they're coming up with a ton of documentation that is, below that WCAG standard just in that cursory examination. And when you see that, you start to think, wow, that's just at the surface level. What lies beneath, so to speak? Um, you know, there's sort of these ongoing workflows that take place. So you've got all the stuff you have to do, and then you've got all the stuff that you have to continue to do as new things are added. That staff time is limited. Again, you could hire an army of folks to do this, but they would have less time to do other things. Or to Ken's point, you could farm this out, but I guarantee you, if you farm it out, you're looking at on the closer of that $25 per page number to do this. So, some things to think about why manual remediation just does not work at scale. So a better approach, right? And we call it, a systems approach, right? Which says like, use this as an opportunity. Go and scan your environment like we talked about. Get a sense for what's there. Start to think about those high impact priority documents. What are the things like we've got to get done? Automate where possible, right? To get you to that base that base level with priority documents at the top, and then add that human review where needed, right? So that you can spend time where it makes the most sense, and then monitor continuously so that when new stuff gets added, right? You're ready to jump on it and make sure that those documents are compliant as well. Ken, when you talk to districts about this, are people drawn to this approach? Is it resonating with districts?
Yeah, I think so. And again, part of the dilemma for most of our school districts, I mean, I recognize a good two-thirds of the names on this call are in districts that are less than 800 kids. So, your capacity that you have with your people to do this work is very limited, first of all. And I think the biggest thing is they want to get the work done. They see where it's needed. So how do you approach it, from a way that can, one, clean up the garden a little bit and keep things like your daughter's room, clean going forward. So I think folks are really talking about it. And from a BOCES standpoint, we know if there's 10 districts in a BOCES, there might be five who are really thinking about this right now. So the BOCES are actually, a lot of them are purchasing the credits to be able to do this work and then doling those out as systems need it. So I think we're developing a good process and system to support all sorts of sizes of districts around the state. So,
And we're going to give you at the end of this a QR code you can scan to kind of get 100 free credits to see this with your own documents. So then you'll know exactly what it can do, what it looks like, how it can be used, and then Ken and his team, can help you work to get the credits that you need to operate at scale. Here we go. So automation first. Again, I'm not gonna, do a demo. I'm not a sort of demo guy. I'm not the tech guy, but I can kind of, I think, explain this because I've seen it done 100 times now. Ken's seen it done as well, and it's pretty cool. And if you look at that picture on your right hand side, and why I was so interested in this is that what you essentially see is a queue, right? That you can a portal with a queue that you can bring up, very similar to a printer queue, really. And I always kind of joke that like this is kind of akin to having like a virtual printer in your office. I mean, it works that quickly, and you can batch upload a significant number of documents, which could have multiple pages in them. The system, using the AI, right, goes in and scans those documents and then does the fixing of that to the WCAG standard. Now, it's not going to get you 100% of the way there. I don't really think anything could get you, even manual remediation, 100% of the way there. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you a report. So when it sends the documents back to you, done, right, it also gives you at the same time a report that says, we have done this to WCAG standard percentage of 95%, 97%. So you have sort of this peace of mind documentation to go along with the output. And then you also have the ability, you can see at the bottom right, to go back into the documents and to make, or to have your staff would make their own fixes, right? And why this is so interesting, and why I was so compelled by it, was that one of the things that happens in school districts is time gaps, right? So if someone makes a request for a document and you send it out and it doesn't come back for 3 weeks, that's where the temperature starts to go up in the room. And that's where these OCR complaints, in a large part, come from. I personally just went through this with Walt Disney World. I don't know if you guys know about that, but there's this whole thing where they've changed their DAS policies, and so people with disabilities are being not getting access to rides and different or things the way they used to. And so I went through this whole process with Walt Disney World, and because it took so long for them to respond to me, right, I issued an OCR complaint. No lawyer picked that up, and I'm sure they get tons of those. But this happened to me, and had they been able to come back in a shorter period of time and say, "Hey, we worked out a solution for you," I wouldn't have issued that complaint. And I think what this allows you to do with the piece of paper and the ability to go back into the document is, in a very quick amount of time, show a good faith effort. And also, if you need to, go back in and up your ante to do a little bit more work on a document without raising the temperature. What do you think about that, Ken?
Yeah, when I talk to school districts around the state, so here's what I'm hearing. There are other companies that do similar work, but what the districts don't get back is they don't get back the report saying that something's been remediated that you can use you can use for compliance or to give your school board. The other thing that happens is you don't get back the original document. So you get the remediated document, but if you want to go in and make some changes to it, or if there's something you need with that original document, it doesn't exist anymore. So I think the process we're talking about is hugely favorable to school districts. And then to your point, typically, like when we run into issues, it is because of a lag in time. And parents are very, they wanted it yesterday. If you could get it done in a couple of days, that's okay. But when you start talking weeks at a time, which in some cases, especially if you do manual remediation on something, that's weeks or months. And a judge, you're not going to sit in a courtroom with a judge and say, well, it took us 4 months. They're going to be like, well, that wasn't timely. I mean, but if you said, yeah, we got it done in 4 days and they still filed a complaint, then I think that's a little bit different story for some sort of legal action. So yeah, the process is great, and I think really not get into the technical aspects of this, it's not that complicated either. So
When this technology first started coming around, there were a lot of articles written about, like, well, don't trust it, right? Is never going to get you 100% of the way there. And that's true. It's not going to get you 100% of the way there. Nothing really is going to get you 100% of the way there. But this isn't a zero-sum game, a 100% game. It is showing that good faith effort, getting you to a standard that is going to make the documentation accessible as quickly as possible for students and for staff. Because when you reduce that gap, you also, take the legal stuff out of it for a second. You also increase the opportunity for the student to stay on track, right? Or the parent, right, to help their students stay on track. And so that student is not falling behind. Even if it's at 97%. The differences are so subtle that they probably aren't really going to care about those differences. What they care about is having the access to be able to stay on track, right, and to be able to achieve their goals academically. And so this gives you essentially that opportunity. So what this looks like in practice, we've been working with a lot of different districts just to kind of walk through this and what does it look like? What's the best way to go about starting to use something like this? We'll often, as we're talking to districts, spend some time again just saying scan, right? Scan your documents, identify where those gaps are in your PDFs at scale. What you'll probably see is that a lot of your documents have sort of similar challenges to them, right? And it can easily be sort of batch uploaded into the system to start to get them at a higher level of accessibility. Then you're going to want to fix once you've scanned, right? And like this is where the AI really comes into play, helping you automate that tagging, the reading order. Man, I saw this one thing. It was like I think a Casby gave it to me. I can't remember, but it was like a blueprint of and it was very complicated. And when you read it without the automated remediation, just a screen reader in Adobe, it was gobbledygook. You could not understand it. And then we put it through the system, and it had organized all the rooms in such a way that you could clearly see where they were on the document. And this all happened in like less than 2 minutes. And that's what really got my brain sort of turning on this thing was just how quickly they were able to do complex documentation, which, a Word doc is one thing with just a paragraph here. That's fairly easy. But when you get into documents with images and, measurements and different things, it starts to get challenging. And this stuff works very well. And then you're going to want to prove, right? Generate those compliance reports, as I said, and start to track this stuff. The cool thing is the compliance reports come, right along with the output. So you don't have to go and ask for those reports. You can start to kind of create a place to store them. so that you have them alongside the remediated documents. So when questions do come up, it's not a matter of here is the document. It's a matter of here's the document and the report. And that changes the tenor of the conversation. I wrote down here human in the loop. This was a term I got from my friend JC Brizard at Digital Promise. I like it. I'm sure other people have heard this term elsewhere, but this notion of like, again, automate first and then choose that human remediation as needed. That's going to save you time and cost and allow you to sort of deploy your investment in human capital where it makes the most sense to do it. I don't think we ever want a situation where it's like automate only. Um, that goes against everything I think that a lot of school districts stand for. And I think this human in the loop concept is really apropos to the way school districts should be thinking about it. Any thoughts on that, Ken?
Yeah, I just, you mentioned a couple things there, and one of the things that school districts like to do is post pictures of kids all over, which is great. That's what we're about. However, we don't do a good job of making those accessible for everybody. So I think that's important. And kind of the human in the loop conversation is, if on the front end we're making sure we're doing, getting it right to put it in the first place, but if we can automate and really get past some of the bigger struggles of making everything compliant, then you can sit down and kind of talk through, okay, how do we post pictures? How do we do the work we do and make this more seamless in the back end to really be one, compliant, and two, so people have access. So yeah.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the difference. We mentioned about how much this stuff was costing before. And then when you start to look at it in terms of what it costs through an automation first lens, we get those prices down on average significantly. I mean, some cases 90%, right? But it's, start to think about 30 cents per page. Oh, wow. Like at that cost, now I can start thinking about doing a lot of documentation. And just so you know, there are levels of remediation that you can do within the platform. Level one, level two, and then level three is something that you can, where you would send out for human remediation help. The lion's share of the documents that a district has and needs to do are going to be that level two and that level one. And, that's going to get you somewhere in that 30-cent range per page, maybe a little bit more depending on the complexity, but you're rarely going to get up to that $8 a page level. In the instances where you do, you might be bringing in some human remediation. So just keep that in mind. There still is a range there, clearly, but there are different levels of this. And lion's share of stuff for a district is going to be in that level one and level two. And I know our friends at ArtScan and AOD can talk to you about that as well. Again, flexible pricing by document type. So, it's a tokenized system, which by the way, I think is really neat too. People were talking about SaaS and how in school districts, Ken, there's like, 150 unused SaaS subscriptions sitting on a school district's budget, and people are getting upset about that for good reason. AI is interesting because it's moving away from the SaaS-based approach where you have a big tool and you only use portions of it and you only use them at certain times to a tokenized approach, which says like use what you need, right? Like, and then those tokens roll over. So it's a great way to kind of uh, make sure you're getting your investment, right? Because you're not going to have the situation where you're just paying blindly for things that you're not using. You're going to have a tokenized system, and you're going to be able to use those tokens when you need them. All right. Oh, so the Colorado lens here, and Ken's already talked about some of this stuff. Staff capacity across your teams. This notion that the BOCES can help you sort of collaborate across the region to make sure you're getting the best pricing for this tool. Supporting those rural and small districts that are far flung all over the state. Every time I come to an event in Colorado, we're always talking about the distance between districts. And so this really is something that everybody can have access to, Ken. And then avoiding, again, that reactive cleanup, which is where we were, a couple months ago before that deadline got moved, which was like kind of deer in headlights. This is going to give us the opportunity to do this in a much more strategic way. Anything you want to add on that front, Ken?
No, we talked about it a lot. I mean, I think that's where the BOCES comes in, and definitely reach out to your regional BOCES because we've talked about this quite a lot at those BOCES meetings, and they can help you with not only pricing, but again, we're buying those tokens in bulk so we can help support all of the regions across the state. So yeah, it's getting out there, and we're excited about the work.
All right, so my suggestion and our suggestion, I think, as we've seen this rolled out now a couple dozen places, start where the risk is the highest, friends, right? Look for those enrollment documents, those SPED documents, those front-facing documents that are going to get people's temperature rising, right? Let's work on those board minutes and those policies, those things that have to be accessible, and are going to get people upset if they can't find or cannot access. And then, get some early wins. This is the cool thing about the extra time, right? If you start now, you can get some early wins and you can build that momentum and use this as a trust building exercise. So, as opposed to a reactive exercise, now we've got some time to use this thing as a tool. Start to put some tokens in now and, get people, show them that you can get them documents back quickly, show them that you have a process for this, and that's only going to build trust as you go. Okay, so simple starting point here, and this is what I would just say is a low risk sort of opportunity. We have developed a readiness diagnostic. It takes about 5 minutes to fill it out, and you get a report back that kind of gives you just a broad sense of where you're at. In the email that I send out after this event, probably tomorrow, because we got to wait for the recording to upload, you're going to get the recording. You'll get a link to this readiness diagnostic, and you will also get a link to the 100 free credits, which I think there's a QR code at the end of this presentation, going to throw up on the screen. But regardless, you'll have access to that. My recommendation would be take the diagnostic. It takes like 10 minutes, and then go and sign up for the free credits. Somebody on the team will reach back out to you and set up a time to go over the results with you, and then to show you how the system works with your own documents. The whole thing probably takes, a half hour of your time. So well worth it if this is in fact something you are considering. Okay, so Ken, end of the day, right? Why now, right? I think we kind of shifted the focus at the beginning of this conversation from deer in headlights to opportunity. Let's move from a backlog to a system. If we start now, we can reduce our long-term costs by starting responsibly and moving forward. And then I think we can support staff and students more effectively starting today, which again is what we mentioned. This thing can get rolling pretty quickly. I mean, you can stand this thing up in minutes, and you're making documents accessible by tomorrow. So it isn't one of those things that it's like a heavy implementation. There's some training that the BOCES can offer you if you need it, right, Ken?
Yeah, there's and both ArchScan and I know Jesse has been doing some work with Rocket to help really stand these programs up. And folks that have been already utilizing the service have said the training's been great. So yeah, I would jump in, utilize the QR code here at the end to get started and see if it's a fit for you. I think that's the first biggest step, and it's not a big leap. And we're going to be at the end of a school year here this week for some of you, and I think this is a good opportunity to jump in now. So.
For sure, for sure. So there it is, the QR code at the end. Scan that, and you will be taken to a website where you can fill out a short form and claim those 100 free credits. It's a great way, Jesse will reach out to you at that point. If you don't have your phone on you or you just aren't able to scan today, it's all right. I am going to send an email out after. It will have the recording of today's event so you can share that with your team. It will have the link to the 100 free credits and to that diagnostic I mentioned. If you're curious, where does my district stand? That is a great way just to get a sense for how you're thinking about this and sort of with the time you have, really plan your opportunities. So I just want to thank everyone again. Ken, of course, I want to thank you and the Colorado BOCES Association. I know you've got a lot going on this summer. We probably will do another one of these at some point. So just keep getting the word out there. Folks, if you're on the call and you know people who might want to hear about this, feel free to forward the email that I'm going to send you on to them. Let them watch it as well. We're just really trying to get the word out. I told Ken this is kind of like a real estate play in some ways, right? It's like Colorado is such a big state. We know that everyone's having this issue, but it takes time to get out to all of those places. So we're doing the best that we can. Again, at Rocket PD, our goal is just to connect people with resources that we think are going to solve a problem. We think we've found one here. I want to thank AOD and ArtScan for kind of giving us access to this, and Ken and the team for helping Colorado get access to it. And just say thanks again. We'll do more of these. If you have questions in the meantime, you can email us at info@rocketpd.com, or you can respond to any of those emails that you might see from me. I hope you have a great rest of your week. If I don't see you, I hope you have a great summer. Ken, I hope you have a great summer too. We're headed to Michigan, my family, in a couple weeks, and we'll be there for a month. So, we got a lot going on.
Yes, you do. Yeah, thanks, Corey. I appreciate it. This is another great event. Really appreciate the time today in the webinar. And if folks do have questions, reach out to your regional BOCES, reach out to me. Happy to support just making Colorado a better place for kids. So that's the job.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon. We'll talk soon. Bye.